Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday, Question Tuesday, the day that I answer real questions from real nerd fighters. And today's question is, was I wrong about Helluva Boss? Well, for those of you with good memories, you might recall that I talked very briefly on Helluva Boss. Helluva Boss, we could also call it. That's an alternative pronunciation, Helluva Boss. I talked about this show in my review of Has Been Hotel, and I said, quote, "It isn't very good," unquote. Has my opinion changed? Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is actually pretty interesting, because this show, I think, had an interesting kind of journey with me, or I had an interesting journey with this show. This show took me on a journey that I didn't expect. Around November, I think, was the first time I saw Helluva Boss. I watched the first 2 episodes, where I watched the pilot in episode 1. And then I watched a little bit of episode 2, I think. I at least know that I saw the part where he's like, "You will be okay, you will be okay, and when creation goes to die, you will find," blah, blah, blah. I saw that part. But, yeah, so with those 2 episodes under my belt, it just, the show wasn't grabbing me, and it wasn't grabbing me so much that I was kind of conclusive on that. I was like, this is just not very good, is it? But, okay, so after Has Been Hotel comes out, and I watch it, and it exceeds my expectations, and it meets the highest bar of quality that I could have expected from it. I think, okay, well, these creators have earned my trust, which means, and they've earned my respect, which means I would kind of, it wouldn't make sense for me not to watch the whole series of Helluva Boss, at least to get an idea and really understand what this show is doing, because the first few episodes really do not, they don't seem to indicate that the show is going to be a real kind of character-driven piece. That it's going to be a piece that really relies on these characters and their stories and their relationships with each other as drama. Because it's such a crass comedy. It's really a Brandon Rogers show. And Brandon Rogers is someone who I was never a big fan of. I can't say I ever disliked him, but I can't say I ever liked him either. I always thought of him as kind of a more tolerable version of Shane Dawson. And that it's that kind of really crass internet humor, which can be funny, but it kind of, I think it takes quite a lot for it to be funny. So, it's a Brandon Rogers show. It's his voice, it's his sense of humor. It's a little, not exactly my cup of tea, right? So, but anyway, what's interesting is that I watched the first season all the way through, and still, it really just wasn't grabbing me. I still wasn't really enjoying it. Even, episodes 1 through 8, even by the time I finished 8, I was just like, I'm not getting whatever I'm supposed to be getting out of this. I'm not connecting with this. And it was frequently quite boring. And I ended up kind of not paying very close attention to some of it. which I guess start in the beginning, it's not so much of a problem, but the more you go through the season, I think the last 3 episodes have quite a bit of character development. They have quite a bit of story, of overarching story. And so it kind of behooves the viewer to pay attention in those episodes. And perhaps I was only paying half attention, so I didn't quite pick up on everything. And so some things were going over my head, particularly toward the end. But what really changed, I think, what really kind of turned me around, in a sense, to getting more interested in this show was the first episode of season 2, which is called Circus. And that was the episode that really kind of solidified my interest in the show, because it was the first one that I enjoyed thoroughly from start to finish. I was enraptured by this episode from beginning to end. I thoroughly loved it. And it's also the episode that probably figures most prominently in the Stolitz arc, which is the ship between Stolitz and Blitz. Stolitz. And once I got into that story arc and could appreciate that, then I think I was able to kind of use that as a foothold for enjoying the series, because that was something I could connect to. That was something I could really understand. And it's interesting because it's not exactly the easiest arc to follow for that first season. Because I think it's quite misleading. And I think it's very clever the way they did that. This show is a lot cleverer than I thought it would be. Like, it does things that maybe I would expect to see in a live-action show, like Better Call Saul, like a dramedy like that. But it does them in this crass cartoon format, which is very interesting. There's a subtlety to this show that impresses me the more I watch it, the more I think about it. So, but the thing is, I watched that first episode of season 2, and then even still, the next few episodes weren't really grabbing me. Like, so it's not like it cured my disinterest in the show. I still kind of wasn't feeling it. I still kind of wasn't getting it. And so at that point, I'm left at the end of seeing all 15, 16 episodes of Helluva Boss. I'm left at the end of it thinking, I have no idea what this show is trying to be. I have no idea what this show is even really about, because it seemed kind of all over the place. And so, like, what's the identity of this show? It was the big question for me, and that I really felt I wanted to answer, and so I watched the show again. I watched all 16 episodes a second time. And I'm telling you, it was so weird, because the show feels like a completely different experience the second time around. The jokes were a lot funnier. The characters were a lot more interesting. There are so many things in the story that just feel like random Brandon Rogers humor, and they kind of take me out of it. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, for instance, in the pilot, where Blitz was spying on and stalking Moxie and Millie in their house. That first time around, I watched that and I think, I don't get, like, this character. This character doesn't make any sense. This feels so random and unbelievable and just frankly awkward. And I didn't know how to fit that into the rest of what I was seeing. But then, with the context of seeing the Aussies episode, And it it really changes how I view that scene in the pilot, because we see in Ozzy's that, oh, actually Blitz has a very unhealthy obsession with stalking Moxie and Millie, and it seems to be because they have a healthy relationship. They have a healthy, loving relationship, which is something that he doesn't feel he can ever have. For whatever reason, he has this kind of... It seems like he has some sort of an inferiority complex, where it's like he doesn't deserve this kind of relationship. And so it's... In that episode, it was really fascinating because he invites Stolitz out on a date to Ozzy's just as a ruse to get him in the door, because he needed a date, so that he can spy on Moxie and Millie, having their good relationship, and then he's there with this man who loves him so much, and he doesn't even realize what he has, because he's just focused on Moxie and Millie. It's really interesting. And so with that context, then suddenly what happened in the pilot is it makes a lot more sense, and it feels plausible for this character. And once you know this character, this joke works a lot better. And I think that is how these early episodes are for me. It's like, before I really knew and understood these characters, the humor was kind of not hitting for me. Because I think it's a situation where the humor really relies on understanding these people. And if you understand these people, then the jokes feel a lot more potent, I would say. They're a lot funnier. And so a lot of things were like that. There's a lot of things I've noticed in this show where they'll set up little clues that are going to be paid off way later in the show. And I don't even know if they had any intention when they set these clues up of paying them off later. But they did anyway. And so the second time around, you see those clues, and it's like, that was something I forgot about because I tuned it out because it just felt so random and pointless the first time around. But the second time, it has a real meaning to it. Like, for instance, in episode 1, when Moxie was worried about killing a family. And you said, well, if it's a mafia dad, then maybe I can, you know. But then we find out later that actually Moxie is from the mafia. And his dad is a mafia dad, and he has a horrible relationship with him. Stuff like that. Like, that's how many episodes removed. That's like 8 episodes in between those two moments. But with that second bit of context, it helps to understand that first bit, which I just forgot about otherwise because it really didn't have a whole lot of relevance. And so that's really smart. A lot of the storytelling in here is very subtextual, which is interesting. A lot of it is through facial expressions, through sort of implicit things that people are saying rather than explicit things. The storytelling in this, it differs quite a lot from Has Been Hotel, because Has Been Hotel is a thoroughly serialized thing where it really has a very clear story that progresses from the beginning to the end of the season. Helluva Boss seems to be more of a soap opera-ish story, which again is interesting for a cartoon like this. It's a sadcom, is what it really is. Like, from what I understand, a sadcom, it's like a comedy show that has some really sad, like genuine, emotional moments in it. And that's a kind of style that I really like. I remember Rick and Morty was doing that for a while. It seemed like they kind of stopped at a certain point. They stopped doing the whole semi-serialized aspect of that show, and I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that Rick and Morty could have made, because that was one of the show's great strengths. And again, there's a lot of subtextual storytelling there, like one moment from Rick and Morty that I remember really liking was that one day when everyone's gone. Morty and Jerry and Beth and Summer, they're all off doing other things, and Rick is just alone with the butter droid. And he's trying to get the butter droid to hang out with him. And the butter droid's just like, dude, I pass butter. That's all I do. And so he's like, okay, what do I do? And he's bored. And then Morty comes through the door. And at first, Rick is excited. And he turns around and he's like, hey. But then he stops himself because he realizes that he doesn't want to seem excited to see Morty. Because he doesn't want to appear as if he really loves Morty. And so he switches from hey to, oh, hey, how are you doing? You know, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? And that's a little bit of subtext storytelling. And little moments like that were things that I really appreciated out of those early seasons of Rick and Morty. This show has a lot of that. This show is loaded with that kind of stuff. And so it really rewards you for paying attention in that way. And so... yeah, it really takes the sadcom idea and rolls with it. And so the show kind of becomes like a cross between a cartoon and a soap opera, almost. Because it's about these characters who have all their problems in life, and you see them deal with them. But that stuff kind of takes a back seat to the more plot-driven elements of it. And honestly, I feel like I prefer the more soap opera drama stuff to the plot stuff. And that's where I differ from most people, it seems, or a lot of people, because there's a lot of complainers about Helluva Boss. And it seems like a big criticism for them is that the show got too much about the personal drama between the characters and their issues with their fathers. And it's like, that's the stuff that I like. That's the stuff that keeps me interested. Because the whole IMP assassin were demons who go to the earth to kill humans for sinners. That thing never interested me. That concept never interested me. Maybe if it was something different, like we possess people, then that would have been a different take that I would have appreciated a little bit more. But when it's just they're going to kill humans, I feel like they never really quite made it interesting. And so anytime they're doing that in the show is probably my least favorite moments. Like, I really didn't enjoy the spring break episode that much. It had some good character moments, like jokes and stuff, like the part where Moxie is saying, I don't listen to so-called pop genre music, and then Blitz just starts tuning him out. That was hilarious. But I don't know, when they go on into the surface world and start killing humans, that stuff just bores me. I'm not really interested in that whole thing. So I would say I disagree with a lot of the criticism, and a lot of people for some reason attribute it to season 2, even though the change in storytelling really happened in season 1. It happened in like episode 6 of season 1 with the X-Files episode where they hallucinate on the truth serum, because that's when we get our first real insights into these characters' minds. And then it continues with Ozzy's, which is very much about the Stolitz arc, and then the Queen Bee episode, which is very much about Luna's introversion, as well as how Blitz is dealing with the stress caused by the Ozzy's incident. And so really the transition from imps killing people to imps having relationship drama really happened in season 1. But I like that transition, and I think that's when the show started to grab me more, was when it became about that. Especially Stolitz, because well, I guess I should get it out of the way first. I have a massive crush on this fucking owl. I don't know either. It's ridiculous, but I just love Stolitz. so much. I would marry this bird, this beautiful bird. He is my favorite character in the show, and he's my favorite character in the whole Helluverse. Love Stolitz. Stolitz. I love Stolitz and I love Stolitz. I'm going to be mixing them up quite a lot because they're such similar words. But the whole drama between him and Blitz is the most fascinating part of the show. And it's fascinating precisely because so much of it goes unstated. And it's just very cute because, you know, I'm a big fan of like what are called like weird couples or weird romances. I think Nostalgia Critic did a top 11 strange couples one year for Valentine's Day, and he had stuff like, for instance, Roger Rabbit and Jessica Rabbit. I really like ones like that, where it's two people who you wouldn't expect to be together, or two people who are just weird in some way. They're not like a typical Hollywood romance. I really like, those are my favorite couples those are my favorite love stories in fiction. And this is a fantastic one. I mean, it is so weird. It's so ridiculous. This tall, beautiful, just gorgeous royal Goetia demon who has tons of money, is super powerful, both in a political sense, in a financial sense, in just a raw sense of being a very powerful demon. This guy could have anybody he wants. And yet the one guy who he's just fixated on, he's just infatuated with, he just cannot stop thinking about and obsessing over, is this tiny, crass, little hunched over murder imp played by Brandon Rogers. It's so funny, and it's so adorable that this guy of all people is the one for him. He's like, this is my soulmate. I don't need to look at anybody else. I found my soulmate. And then to top it off, Blitz doesn't even reciprocate those feelings. So it's it's a pathetic, unrequited love for this guy who's like so much beneath him in any kind of status. Somehow this is the guy who Stolitz just loves, and we see a bit of why that is in the circus episode, and it's really fascinating. But and so both of these characters are very pathetic, because Blitz has that really pathetic need to live vicariously through Moxie and Millie's love story, instead of just embracing his own love story, which is right there. And then Stolitz is pathetically just hoping and wishing that Blitz will embrace him, and he never does. And so it's really, it's a great love story, but it's not really a love story yet, because they haven't actually accepted the fact that they're in love with each other. But then there's also that big misunderstanding that's at the core of the Stolitz story, because it seems that Blitz has a lot of resentment for Stolitz, because he feels that he is being basically used by Stolitz. That Stolitz is this much more powerful demon who is basically using him, like treating him as a pet, being kind of demeaning to him. Like he's always calling him Blitzy, which is his little pet name. And for Stolitz, this is an affectionate thing. This is a respectful thing. This is him just expressing his love for Blitz by calling him Blitzy. But then to Blitz, it doesn't register that way. It just registers as demeaning. He's not using my real name. And perhaps he has some sort of connection between that and his old clown name, Blitzo, which he really wanted to get away from. And it seems that their first interaction after 25 years that we see in Circus, where they have sex for the first time, that interaction seems to have kind of set the stage for their whole relationship in not a very healthy way, because Blitz, clearly, I mean, the only reason he had sex with Stolitz was as a pity fuck, and to distract him so that he could steal his, what's it called? His grimoire. But on Stolitz's end, it just feels like this guy who I had a crush on since I was a kid meets me again 25 years later, and it's a dream come true. He makes love to me, and it's amazing. It's the wish fulfillment of my life. And so he just, from that point on, he's obsessed with Blitz. And he doesn't even seem to care that Blitz stole his grimoire. He's like, yeah, you can have it just as long as you bring it back every month. But then that creates the whole transactional aspect of their relationship. And Blitz seems to view their relationship as entirely transactional. But whether it's hard to know if he thinks that way because that's how he wants to view it, or if he thinks that that's how Stolitz is viewing it. Because that's not how Stolitz is viewing it. Stolitz really loves Blitz. But Blitz seems to think that Stolitz just wants to like hold the grimoire over him as like a bargaining chip for sex. So every month, you gotta fuck me, and then I'll let you have the grimoire for the rest of the month. And so, because of that transactional nature, Blitz feels very used by him. And he doesn't like that relationship. But Stolitz just seems kind of blissfully unaware of this. It seems like there are so many occasions where Stolitz says something to Blitz, and Blitz is, expressing a resentment against him very clearly. But Stolitz seems to just interpret that as him teasing him, like he's being a tsundere, and that he really likes him, but he's like pretending to not like him. But it's like, no, he actually doesn't like you. Or he does like you. And that's the thing. I think Blitz likes Stolitz for his charm and everything. And, that's kind of evidenced by certain things, like, for instance, how he stayed the whole night that first time they fucked. He didn't have to do that, but he did. He said it was going to be over real fast, and then it cuts to the morning after real fast. And so it does seem that Blitz does have a certain affection for Stolitz, but he's unable to really kind of manifest that. Not only because he feels like Stolitz is abusing him almost, or taking advantage of him, but also because of what I said earlier about that inferiority complex that he seems to have, and that feeling like at the end of episode 8 when Luna drives him home and he's on the couch saying that Fizzarolli was right, that he'll never find true love or whatever. He'll never his relationship life, his love life is just fundamentally broken. He'll die alone. That's an anxiety that he seems to have. And so it makes sense then why he would be kind of reluctant to really, I guess, take in the advances of Stolitz as anything more than a transactional relationship. But he also seemed to be really thrown off when he found that Stolitz could get hurt, because Stolitz is super powerful, and he's bodyguarded for Stolitz before, but it never seemed like Stolitz actually needed protection. He just did it to have him around, and Blitz knows that. And so it seems like Blitz never thought that Stolitz could ever really be in danger, because he's just always so much more powerful than any of the other demons who might want to kill him. But then when he finds out that Stolitz got really hurt, really badly, seems to have been really thrown off by that and really worried. Like he was worried for a friend. And so there is definitely an affection on the part of Blitz for Stolitz. But just how deep that affection goes is hard to say. And we'll see more how that develops in the following seasons. But I'm really enjoying that relationship. Because it's fun to talk about, it's fun to analyze because so much of it goes unsaid. Because we have to read stuff into it. It reminds me of the relationship between Jimmy and Kim in Better Call Saul. How that relationship is entirely unspoken. It's entirely... there's no words really almost even exchanged in that relationship. It's all very subtextual. And so you have to read things into their relationship by the way they interact with each other. And so, yeah, I really like shows that do that give you a lot to chew on, and this show surprised me in doing that. Another odd couple, I guess, another odd love story is the one between Fizzaroli and Asmodeus. And that one's just hilarious because it's honestly, it's like the alternate version of Blitz and Stolitz. It's like the healthy version of Blitz and Stolitz if they actually got along with each other well enough to show genuine affection. But it's funny to me just because of how weird these people are, because it's another situation with a powerful demon who is in love with a tiny little imp. But Fizzaroli is just, he's such a funny character because he's like this goofy clown dude who sounds like something between Fidget the Bat and Krusty the Clown. This real kind of Candy Candido. And he's played by Alex Brightman, who did Adam and Serpentius in Has Been Hotel. I don't know how he pulls off that voice so well. Even singing, he sings whole songs as Fizzaroli and does it very well. But it's like, also the way they draw him, though, even though he's this ridiculous circus clown, they draw him kind of sexy. They have, he has this kind of twink body thing going on, so you can understand why Asmodeus would like him so much. It's absurd, but it's, you know, it's actually quite endearing, their relationship. But it's, again, I think it serves as to be a sort of like, this is, if Blitz were less guarded and had more of an ability to connect with other people, this is what their relationship might look like. And if Stolitz had more experience with love, because that's the other thing, the reason Stolitz can't make up for it on his end is just because he's so naive and inexperienced. For one thing, he's a very young demon. He's only in his 30s, it seems. Which is strange for a Goetia, because they seem to be like these really old, powerful families, but no, he's very young. And he's only had experience with his wife, who he never wanted to marry, because he's not even attracted to women. And so this is really his only ever experience with love. Ozzy's was the only time he was ever really out on a date. And of course it wasn't even a real date, but he didn't know that. And so you see him trying to figure it out as he goes, but he's not good at it just because he doesn't have any clue what he's doing. Whereas Asmodeus, obviously, he's basically the god of lust. That dude has probably been on 50,000 dates and been in 50,000 relationships. Who knows? But that's the trouble there, is just that Blitz is so guarded, Stolitz is so inexperienced, but with Fizz and Ozzy, you see how, like, what if they weren't like that? This is the relationship they could have. And I think we see a bit of that difference between Fizz and Blitz in the Oops episode, where Blitz saves Fizzaroli's life, and then in a moment where they're expressing some genuine, sincere emotions to each other, he's like, would it be weird if we made out right now? Which shows, I think, how how Blitz has trouble being sincere. He has trouble with sincere emotion. It seems that he always needs to hide behind this exterior of his crass Brandon Rogers persona. And so in that way, he reminds me a lot of Angel Dust. And in fact, I think that he's a very similar character to Angel Dust from Has Been Hotel, because Angel Dust does the same thing, because he's hurting a lot. And instead of just being very upfront with that, and allowing that to more or less control his life, he hides it and covers it up with this exterior of being this kind of really horny, wisecracking man. But that's not really his whole personality. He has a lot of depth that he isn't showing. And it seems like when the emotions get too strong, Blitz has to hide behind this cover of being crass. And Fizz, who isn't that way, and we see them interacting as children with their toy balloon horses. Fizz doesn't like the idea of blood. He thinks blood is gross, and Blitz is like, no, blood is cool. So that shows this kind of disconnect between them, their personalities, that Fizz is much more of a romantic and Blitz is a lot more of an edgelord. And so we see that then mirrored again in that moment where Fizz is like, yeah, of course it would be weird if we made out right now. What is wrong with you? But it's yeah, things like that I really like about this show. So in that way, like I said, the show really impressed me the second time around. It's way better than I thought it was going to be. And so, but at the same time, it's still a little bit hit and miss. It's not quite like Has Been Hotel, where every episode just kind of hits almost perfectly. Episode 7 was a little bit eh. But, you know, that show has a lot of consistency. That show has a lot of focus. And it has much more of a Broadway style, whereas the songs in Helluva Boss, they're there, but they're a lot more diegetic in style, because they're always sung on stage, pretty much. Most of them seem to be sung by people on stage, with a few exceptions. But yeah, Helluva Boss is a lot less Broadway, and it's a lot more hit and miss. Sometimes episodes don't hit, like Unhappy Campers. I don't think I liked a single moment in that episode. Like the Barbie wire story was boring. The Moxie and Millie cross-dressing story was boring as hell. Sometimes you just get a dud like that in Helluva Boss. But overall, I like the variety. I think what I like about this show is that it has the freedom to do different things. And you never exactly know what you're going to see next, because there's a bunch of different characters with their own little stories, and it could choose to focus on any one of them doing any particular thing. You could have a real kind of IMP focused episode. You can have a real Stolitz focused episode. You can have an Ozzy and Fizz focused episode. They do different things, and that's something I really appreciate. I really like variety. And just another note, the animation in this show is amazing. It's so much better than most television animation. It's crazy how good it is. The staging and the dynamic shots that they use, like especially in some of the action scenes, like in episode 6, that one had a crazy action scene, and that one also had a really interesting musical number where they changed the animation style and made it more Disney-ish. So they're always experimenting, it seems. They're always trying to push the boundaries of what they can accomplish. And that's something I just really appreciate about this new wave of independent animation, because they're not, it doesn't seem like they're limited by the idea that they need to budget these shows, even though they do have to do that. But it doesn't seem like that affects their thinking in terms of what we can accomplish, budget and time frame. It seems like there's a lot more freedom. Like, they only make an episode of Helluva Boss every few months, and that time frame, I think, gives them a lot more space to turn around something of quality, something that is going to stand out. So, you know, it's always way more of an event when an episode of one of these shows comes out than it would be for a regular cartoon. Like, nobody really cares that much what the next episode of SpongeBob is going to look like, because there's kind of an expectation that SpongeBob is not going to do anything particularly impressive. We know the deal, you know. It's a pretty established formula. But with these shows, it seems like they're always trying to find some way to impress you and to keep you guessing and to keep you interested. And I really appreciate that. So I think that's all of my thoughts on Helluva Boss. I'd say overall, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I'd give Has Been an 8. Just because I think Has Been has some story issues and plot holes and stuff that are kind of an issue, kind of a problem. Helluva Boss, it has kind of a mixed tone. It's a little bit scatterbrained. It's a little bit hit and miss. But overall, I think they're very good, and I would recommend watching them. That's it. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.